Cold outside.
Oh, I
Very
love
good
Zoe
choice.
Deschanel. Actually. I love
Wow,
her.
very, very.
Non-sequitur. Your facts are incorrect. Non-sequitur. Your facts are incorrect. Non-sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.
Hi, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Hope you're having a good day. It's getting close to Christmas. I've been jamming to Christmas carols all day long. I know, Steve, you hate Christmas because you're a communist.
I do. I do. I cannot stand Christmas music. I admit it. I love the season. Don't get me wrong, but I just cannot deal with Christmas music. Everywhere I go shopping or anywhere I hear Christmas music, I'm like, I need to get in and get out.
Why? It's literally like the happiest music on the planet. Like
It is. I'm telling you from experience. Anybody who has ever been in retail, I think will agree with me. When you're in retail and you have to listen to it for literally 2 months, like right after the day after Thanksgiving, from Black Friday, which is the worst goddamn day in the history of mankind for retail, you learn to hate music, Christmas music. You just learn to hate it, and especially because I told you before, the only disc we had for like a year was Mariah Carey's Christmas songs. So I had that just ingrained in my brain. It was
it's such a good song, though. What's your
she's a fantastic singer, don't get me wrong, but
well, if you had to pick one, what's your favorite Christmas song?
Grandma Got Ran Over by a Reindeer.
And Nicholas, what would you say yours is?
Oh God, my favorite Christmas song. I'm usually for the classics. I can't think off the top of my head of what my favorite is. Oh, I can. Zoe Deschanel in It's Cold Outside.
Oh, I
Very
love
good
Zoe
choice.
Deschanel. Actually. I love
Wow,
her.
very controversial choice, actually. You selected the controversial,
Bing Crosby.
which I like. I like that you did that because I'm on the side that is not a you know the controversy with that song now, right, Nicholas? Have you heard of this?
I don't.
Really?
Well, yes.
Wow.
There's a ban in some radio stations for "Baby It's Cold Outside" because it's rapey and it goes against yeah.
Well,
So we're not
okay. I see the
we opened that can of worms on here. Well, me and Steve vented about that one episode, but everybody knows how we feel about that. I like that you picked that side or that song. I think it's good. It's a good choice. So,
we're talking prison. We're going to be talking torture, and so here the Black Friday and the music. I'm saying that's probably its own form of cruel and unusual. Is my thinking.
See, he gets
Ooh.
it. He gets it.
I like Nicholas. So and while I'm doing that, let me go ahead and introduce him properly here. Nicholas Lamar Soutter is a writer and philosopher. He was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I would read all of your because you have a super impressive resume that I'm looking on your about website of your point. Do you just want to take a second real quick and hit like the points that you feel are like the most relevant to what we're going to be talking about? Because you have you run the gambit on things that you do.
I do. I'm a jack of all trades, and I jump around a lot. One of the biggest is I wrote a book, Rebuttal to Atlas Shrugged, and Midwest Book Review said it should be required reading for every high school kid in the country. It got a Kirkus star, won Best of Kirkus 2012. I also wrote a book that was actually a memoirs it was called Confessions of a Sin Eater. It is the memoir of a prison psychologist who spent 10 years at Walpole Maximum Security Prison. It was actually also a supermax at the time. It's now called Cedar Junction, but it's a Massachusetts prison. Then recently, I still do short stories. I still do essays. I started work on what's called the Atheist Codex, or now the Humanist Codex. It is a collection of atheist arguments designed to be approachable, especially to theists, actually, and a place where theists can come, and if they're starting to question their belief, they can find support. We have people who offer support, who's struggling with that, and I believe two things simultaneously. One, religion is gonna kill us all if we don't find a way to deal with it. When you talk about global warming denial, when you talk about human suffering, religion is almost always at the head of it. Prisons are an exception. And that it's actually much harder to deconvert and much more painful than a lot of atheists give credit for. So this is a site that's designed to try to make it that gap. So those are the biggies that I've been working on. And I'm best known for.
Let me ask you real quick, Nick, because there were a couple of parts in that where your audio level dropped out briefly. And I don't know if that's. I think you said. Do you want to try that other microphone or headset real quick while I?
Yeah, I'm going to switch headsets.
Okay, let's do that to make sure. Steve, I saw that you're muted. I think, Steve, by the way, but this is your Christmas present from me. I saw you light up a couple times, and like I knew that you would be extremely happy with having Nicholas on, and so I didn't tell you the full extent of his background, but Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. I people may know that I have read Atlas Shrugged, and I completely think it's one of the worst things I've ever had to endure. It's painful. It's absolutely painful. Objectivism is the gateway drug to philosophy, and once you get past that, then you're okay. But yeah, I don't know. So your rebuttal to is that it was a pro or con? Because I got to tell you, I'm not a fan of Atlas Shrugged in any way, shape, or form. It was like pulling teeth. It's so. Ayn Rand could take literally 2 chapters to say one thing.
Yes. Well, the final soliloquy is 75 pages. 75 pages to get across one very simple idea. And when John Galt is giving his lecture,
who is John Galt? Yeah.
Oh God, don't. That wasn't funny. That wasn't funny.
I might as well. Oh, that would drop out. Yeah. No, it was an awful book. Yeah, it was just horrific. Never.
Steve
again.
is Steve. I think Steve would be very interested in your I know the conversation is going to focus on the prison side, but it would be cool to also kind of get into the Atheist Codex, because I think that's something that Steve would really because he's all about argumentation and that sort of thing. That's what really piqued my interest about you in the first place, is seeing that the Atheist Codex. I mean, it's an extensive thing.
I literally just had on Dr. Graham Opie on my channel yesterday. If people want to go check that out on my personal channel, Steve McRae, great contemporary philosopher, and he has a book called Atheism: The Basics, where he compiles a bunch of justifications for being an atheist, and I mean as in the philosophical sense, as in believing that there are no gods. And so, yeah, your codex might have a lot of the similar arguments that he has.
Are we back?
Did you get them? Nicholas, you back?
I can't hear him.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hopefully this one's not going to cut out.
I think it's picking up your other microphone, because it sounds far away. You sound super far away. Let's try that. Give me a test real quick. I don't even hear him now.
Yeah, now it's 0.
I wonder if he pulled out his. Yeah. If he pulled out the we wouldn't pick up a microphone then. Steve, while he's fixing that, you want to talk about the link sharing thing that you want to do?
Yeah, real quick. So people may have been noticing some of our videos are actually getting a lot more views than normal. One of the reasons for that is I think we've actually hit the algorithm both on Social Blade and on YouTube, and that actually takes place when people share the URL. So that URL at the very top is actually tracked, and when you send it out via the Facebook page, especially when you put it when it says like share and has all the options for you to share, and you send it out on Twitter, that's all tracked. And so I have a list of all the people that have actually sent these links out via Twitter, and so I know for a fact that the URL is tracked because I can see it. That when it gets a certain threshold, YouTube starts promoting our videos. So I want to do a call out to everybody. First, I want to thank everybody who has been sharing our videos, and then I want to do a call out for people that have not shared the video, if they'll take the time to do that, because it makes a huge, significant amount of difference of how many people actually get recommended these videos in their YouTube feed. So you all have a Twitter. Take 30 seconds to just hit share, or just copy and paste it into Twitter. That works as well. Although I don't know how it's tracked differently, but I do know it's tracked, because anybody who's ever cut and pasted it, I do get a little notification that says it's been tweeted out. So we appreciate that. And I also want to take time to thank our subscribers and our Patreons. You guys have just been amazing. Kyle and I were talking last night. We were just saying that we have the best audience possibly imagined. We never expected to have this kind of this amazing audience that we had when we started this.
Oh, most days you're awesome. Some days you get a little
there's 1 or 2%. Yeah. Screw you guys. But for the most part.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm not sure what's happening right now. But so me and Steve will continue to talk until hopefully Nicholas rejoins us. But yeah,
butt shot.
I don't know. But the Atheist Codex is what initially kind of piqued my interest about him, and then once I started talking to him, we got into the prison discussion, and I was like, well, that'd be a really good topic to hit. But I think he is somebody that you would really like to maybe get on your channel or something to go into the argumentation side and that sort of thing. Which, by the way, we can talk about last night and how there was literally an argument for 2 hours that I thought my head was going to explode. I literally thought my head was going to explode.
At the argument toward the end?
Yes. Where y'all, neither side would relent. It was.
Well, yeah, but that was over.
Everybody after you left.
I was neutral on that. I was just like, you know what? I'll tell the people that are listening now, if they didn't watch last night on the after show that we had for Grand Opie, Kyle and Ocean were the two people making sense in the hangout. So at that point, I knew we had to call it quits, because when Kyle and Ocean are the two people that are actually making the most philosophical sense, something's upside down in reality. But they were. So
it's and the crux of the argument, where I was making sense, which is really weird because I should never make sense, is that you're going to disagree in life, and you're going to be in situations where two people have an opinion, and that's okay. It's completely fine that both of you have an opinion that's not the same. But when you sit there and for 2 hours you are trying to drive home that one of you is right and the other one's not, neither one of you are going to relent at that point. Number one, just out of pride. I mean, that's one thing. Like, you're not going to admit that you're wrong, even if you are wrong. And so we're literally sitting there.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Hey. I think I solved it all. But please continue. I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, no, you're not. I was ranting about arguments going on for 2 hours about, what were we even arguing about? Or they were arguing about, Steve? It was
the main thing was they were trying to compare the God concept agnostic to something like fairies. Actually, that was the main crux for the analogy of things that are more supernatural, as far as fairies, leprechauns, everything, and comparing that to the concept of a deity. My argument was basically that deification argument has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. So even if you think there's only a ontological comparison, socially there's a huge discrepancy between the two, because the God concept has had a huge influence on society, good, bad, or indifferent. it's still an influence, right? So that was my argument, and then they just ran with it, and then you had two polarizing sides, and I just listened. I had nothing to do with it after that point.
Literally 2 hours. Literally 2 hours.
Yeah.
On the same, and I was dying. Anyways,
Yeah,
I'm glad that you're back. The video looks like it's working fine. You sounded fine a second ago. So
Audio's
let's
fixed.
dive in. And you're you are the expert here on what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm literally going to let you start where you want to, and we'll kind of have the discussion as we go along. I don't know. I'm not sure where you want to pick up, but it's all yours.
Oh, well, just double check. You can hear me.
Absolutely.
yes, that actually sounds great.
All right, I'll start then with the big picture view. The United States has absolutely no idea what it's doing when it comes to prisons, and we don't even know why we have them. We don't. We haven't a clue. Do we have them to reform people? Do we have them to punish? Do we have them as a deterrent? And what ends up happening is, because we haven't figured out what the justice system is supposed to be, we haven't figured out what the prison system is supposed to be, we try to do all these things, and we end up doing all of them extraordinarily poorly. Prisoners come out of the system worse than they went in by a significant margin. That doesn't help anybody. You've got a system, especially at the supermax level, but at every level, what it really is it's a system for creating monsters. It's people go in, and you can take someone who's in on anything from embezzling, white collar crimes, to drug offenses, which we think of often as a really big deal. It's not. It's a medical problem. It's not a criminal problem. But they go in, they get beaten, they get raped. They learn that the only way to survive in prison is to, and this may not be your story. I heard pieces of it, and I think you may have escaped what certainly happens at some of the at the federal penitentiary levels and at the supermax level. But you learn that the only way to survive is to be aggressive, be hostile, and then those skills you end up trying to translate to the outside world when you get out. That's why within 5 years, 75% of all people who get released on parole have been rearrested. 50% end up back in jail. That, in my mind, is completely unacceptable numbers, but that's what we've got. We also have a system, massive overpopulation. I'm sorry, if you were going to say something, please. I can continue this.
I was just going to say what you said there. That opening was brilliant, and on my experience and what I went, what I saw, and I was lucky because I didn't endure all of the beatings and all that stuff. But the way you describe things is spot on. It couldn't be more spot on if you tried.
And we're glad. Actually, we almost revel in it. We think that's the way it's supposed to be, and there is especially with conservatives, but liberals don't pick this up. You'd expect liberals to, pick this up and run with it, but they don't. We say to ourselves, hey, if you've committed a crime, you should have your license revoked. You should not ever be able to vote again. Well, excuse me, at some point, isn't the idea that you've paid your debt to society, which I actually don't believe in, but at least in theory, isn't that the idea? And you're still a human being. You're still a citizen of this country. You have rights outside of prison. You have rights inside of prison, and they are completely ignored and routinely violated. And the general consensus of most of the people in this country on some spectrum is that that's really okay because these are bad guys. No, it's not. And that is right now coming home to roost. What happens is the reason, so North Korea, we have a greater percentage of our people in prison than North Korea, than China, than Russia, than Iran. pick a Middle Eastern country. In fact, you probably know where I'm going with this. We have a greater percentage of our population in prison, 700, I think, for every 100,000 people in our population. We have more in jail than any other country in the world. What's more, we actually have a greater number of people. So it's not just per capita, but the actual number is higher than any other country in the world. That's staggering when you consider the fact that China has 1 billion people. The population of China is 1 billion. They have 3 times as many people as we do, and we have more people in jail. Which one's the oppressive regime? Which one's the land of the free? Something is seriously wrong if we haven't put that together. So, and the reason this happens is because we keep, first of all, well, it started in the 80s, and that's another long story. But aside from the tough on crime and the idea that if you give really harsh sentences, you're going to stop crime, that added to it, and the fact that people don't come out reformed, so they go right back in. So you end up with people not really coming out of the system, no way to gracefully exit out of the system, treated terribly. And if you're going to treat somebody like a monster, guess how they're going to behave? I mean, that's basic. Yeah, that's basic human psychology. If you treat somebody like they're worthless, they're going to act in ways that reinforce that. There's no incentive not to. If you're going to take away all their rights, they can't get a job, they can't drive, they're in debt when they come out of prison. If you're going to do all these things to them, I'd like someone to explain to me what it is you expect them to do except to go out and rob and steal, because those are the only employment options you've left them. And nobody's been able to explain that to me. So the system, it keeps growing. We keep having more and more people. It's right now, just the federal system is about 1/10 the size of our military. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but our military spending is already quite staggering. We have 140 foreign bases across the world that we're supporting all this. 140, and 1/10 is just the federal system. That's not including state budgets. That's staggering. And if we don't find a way to solve this problem, it's going to become unsustainable.
I wrote down. I just added a couple of things, but prior to the show, I wrote down some things that I wanted to hit that maybe you could speak in your experience. But there are certain things that, as somebody who was in the system, in that that rotating door, that I point to as things that are that just have to be at some point. Like, these things cannot continue to be the case, or it's going to become untenable. And the things that I saw while I was in there that are affecting prisons mainly are a lack of programming that you have there. It's basically storage for people. You go there and you're put in a place, and there's nothing actively done to either correct or rehabilitate. Sure.
So yeah, that was one of the things I left out. But yeah, presumably to protect the civilian population. They don't care what happens to you. They're just you're in cold storage and you're sequestered, and that's all really anyone cares about. I apologize for interrupting, but that's another.
No,
we think that's what prisons are for too. It's insane. We don't know what prisons are for. It's a million different things. And
is it like if you commit a violent offense, like murder, rape, anything violent, I think that's a completely different ballgame. And I think we should make the distinction that we're what we're talking about tonight doesn't apply in this case. Like, when I say programs, and I'm getting ready to talk about the addressing the issue of why they're there, it wouldn't apply to necessarily those, because that's a different ballgame in terms of harming other people. But drug offenses and things like that, like just very, very nonviolent offenses. If you're going to drugs, if you're going to prison for drugs, right? You're sent there for me, I was sent there because I had a little too much of a cocaine habit, and that was never addressed. And that's the one thing that I took away. I was like, okay, I'm being punished for doing, for being addicted to cocaine and the things that come along with it. Thankfully, I didn't get involved in any kind of theft or anything. It was just for the cocaine. But that was never talked about. I was never sent to see anyone while I was there to, you know, ask how I was feeling about my addiction to cocaine. You literally were sent there. You work, you go back to your bunk, and then you wait for the next day to come on, and it's just a repetitive cycle. And why is that the case? Why do we not have any types of things where they're actively addressing, treating it like an addiction rather than just being crime all by itself?
Two reasons. One, it costs money. Two, so Ronald Reagan, and actually the tough on crime started before Ronald Reagan, but Ronald Reagan closed all the mental health facilities and threw a tremendous number of mentally ill out into the street. And it started this culture of not distinguishing between health and mental health issues and criminal behavior. So if you've got a guy, and again, Walpole maximum security, which is from now on in general, when I give examples of anything relating to a prison, I'm going to be talking about Walpole in Massachusetts. It's now Cedar Junction. But they had a number of mentally ill people. Some of them clearly were also violent outside of it, and their mental health had nothing to do with it. Some of them, if they could get the mental health under control, would be fine. But here they are housed with murderers, psychopaths, and people who will take advantage of them, who know how to take advantage of them, and there's absolutely no protection for them. Mental health has never been taken particularly seriously in this country anyway. And health in general, the idea that, so especially with Reagan, the tough on crime, increasing sentences, but also, and even Nancy Reagan was a huge part of this. She did the Just Say No campaign, but behind that was this saying, if someone is dealing drugs, it's going to hurt our kids. If someone is doing drugs, it's going to hurt our kids. Maybe they are going to see it, and then the world ends. So you send them to jail for 20 years. That's what you have to do, and that will act as a deterrent and a punishment. It does neither. And especially, by the way, this is going to sound a little odd, but if you think about it, there's very little difference to the human mind when you hear this between 5 years, 10 years, 15, and 20. At 5 years, your life is over. You'll get out, and you'll probably get out, you know, young enough that you can still do things, but all your friends will have moved on and forgotten about you. You won't be able to get a job. You won't be able to do anything. And the way your mind works, if someone says, well, crime carries a sentence not of 5 years, but of 10, that doesn't double your disincentive against it. That doesn't double your, oh, whoa, I really shouldn't do it because it's 10 years. Your brain doesn't really process the difference. At most, there's a minor difference in your thinking about just how long that is, but not a lot. So this tough on crime, and we're going to add just massive penalties for everything as a deterrent and as revenge. It's genuine revenge. We are a civilized people. You're not, and we are going to screw you for it. And that's, yes, please.
Let me ask you about, since you mentioned the war on drugs, I had this here too. What about the, what's your opinion on things like when Richard Nixon, who was, to me, he was the guy that kicked off, you know, this war on drugs. Like, it began with him really hardcore, but yeah. What's your opinion on the sentencing laws in terms of the differences between something like cocaine and something like crack cocaine? Because that's pointed to as a big means of why, you know, a certain percentage of the population is in prison. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. First of all, Nixon's cute because he didn't care too much about drugs. What he cared about was the Vietnam War and the protesters who were trying to stop it. And guess what most of them were? Hippies who smoked pot. So he went after pot. Pot, nobody cared about pot until Nixon. Then he went after pot, and he went after every drug with that. The historians may disagree with me on this. I don't think he cared about the drugs. He cared about getting rid of his political opponents. That was the hippies. They smoked pot. They did a lot of other drugs. So he went after all of it. And that's important because you need to realize that it's the same thing. Why do we have speed limits? It's not for safety. It is now, and people think that's why they were put in. No, speed limits were put in the 70s when there was a gas crisis, and that's in fact why, my daughter said, "Wow, isn't it a coincidence that a car is most efficient?" Because she had asked, "What's the best speed for saving fuel?" I said, 60 miles per hour. Oh, wow, it's amazing that that's the speed limit too. It's not a coincidence. So it's got nothing to do with safety.
Yeah, can I also add on that? That's at the same time, because I remember these days, especially during the even and odd gas days, and I'm sure you recall those as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I'm actually not quite that old, but yeah.
Yeah, you
don't let the gray fool you. I'm that gray, but I'm not that old. I was born in 73. 74.
Well,
wow, I can't believe I got my own birthday wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm only a little older than you. But we remember those similar things. But yeah, when they added in the carpool lanes, remember those days? They actually had found that the carpools were to minimize emissions, and they've actually found that they cause more pollutants and more problems because you're limiting a whole entire lane. So it had the opposite effect. But I wanted to note two things while I can. One, about your 5 years and 10 years, things like that, because I completely understand that. Not to have a comparison to prison, but the 6 years that I did in the military is a lifetime. It's a very, very long period of time. Yeah, so I do get the concept of being in confined spaces. I mean, when you're aboard a ship for even 6 months, that is that I was on for 4 years, but you're out at sea 6 months at a time, pretty much. That you cannot imagine how long that is. So I couldn't imagine people doing 10-year stints and 15-year stints and 20-year stints because, one, I don't think it makes a difference to the individual whether they have 5 years or 10 years or 15 years because the outcome is going to be the same to them. This is where I think it needs to be really dived into more. John Rawls' approach and things of, are you going for restorative justice? Are you going for retributive justice? Because you mentioned this at the very beginning. Until our country decides which path they kind of want to go and can differentiate between these types of offenses, we're not going to have any kind of real reform in the prison system.
I completely agree. But to actually quickly get back to because this is an interesting, there is now a bill that just passed yesterday in the Senate. I don't know if it's anywhere in the House. It's a prison reform bill. It's called First Step. I think it's called First Step because it's like first step for people getting out. And they say huge prison overhaul. It's not. It's going to release about 7,000 people. They're mostly black. The reason it's them and mostly black is because it takes crack cocaine and reduces it to roughly the same type of offense as powdered cocaine, and that was a phenomenally racist. Crack cocaine is in general used by blacks. Powdered cocaine is used by whites. So if you have powdered cocaine, and they're the same thing. They're the same thing. If you use powdered cocaine, you could often get off with just a warning, probation, something like that. Crack cocaine was usually, depending, minimum 20 years. 20 years for the same thing. The difference is the color of the people who were showing up in front of the judge. And, the black people look kind of scary, so obviously they have to stay in jail a lot longer. This bill was designed... I'm sorry, yeah.
I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, how does something like that get pushed through? Like, something that's blatantly that racist. Like, how did that ever...
Nobody had the stats at the time, and what happened was, you have to realize it's very compartmentalized. And you want to learn about compartmentalization. There's a couple stories, but it's very compartmentalized. So, the people who know exactly what the punishment is for powdered cocaine aren't necessarily thinking about crack cocaine and saying it's the same thing, and they're not even thinking about. And what they do is they say, okay, who are the people who are coming? And unfortunately, because we do have institutionalized discrimination, and I mean the amount of data on this is staggering. It is very difficult for blacks to obtain even remotely close to the same social status as whites. So when they show up before a judge, they've got a public defender. If they even have a lawyer, they're not eloquent. They can't, and so wow, they must be more of a criminal. And nobody at the time specifically associated it with color. And in hindsight, you're sitting there going, how could you not do that? They didn't have the stats. The people weren't looking at the overall picture. They were looking at what was right in front of them. And that's what it was at the time.
That's bad.
20 years versus probation. So that's
and
presumably fixed in this bill.
That actually leads to my next point, or the next thing that I think should just be completely done away with in it, and overall is the mandatory minimums sentencing. The fact that there is, and I point to this case. There is a I was watching on YouTube. You can actually search for this. Not right now, so don't turn that channel. But there was a teacher.
No, wait, I can do this.
There was a teacher that she let a student, I believe he was 14 at the time, touch her breast. This is in Missouri. I want to say it's Missouri. Somebody, if you're going to look this up, correct me and find out. But I forget what state it is. Say Missouri. But she let a 14-year-old student touch her breast. She got life in prison because of mandatory minimum sentencing in that state. The judge and you could see the pain on the judge's face, because he was like, I cannot believe that I am bound by the law to give you a life sentence for letting a 14-year-old boy touch her breast.
The one that I heard.
Real quick, I'm against mandatory minimum.
Oh yeah, please.
Doesn't the judge have some kind of judicial? As far as I understand, a judge still, in the most egregious cases, can have some kind of judicial say, but in this, when it comes to the mandatory thing, they have zero. They absolutely have correct. No ability. Yeah, see, that just makes no sense to me whatsoever. What's the point of having a judge if you don't allow the judge to do their job? Mandatory sentencing takes away an ability for a judge to adjudicate properly and fairly these types of sentences. So yeah. That's just idiotic.
Well, that gets back to it. I mean, you're really talking. A judge is the judicial branch. This is the legislative branch, and they're sitting there going, we don't trust you guys." Judges screw up, and judges screw up a good deal. They don't screw up nearly as much as people think they do, and the reason is because it's the screw ups you see on television, not the times they get it right. Most of the time, they get it right within within the system, but. Legislatures take a look at what judges are doing, and they say, no, this is activist judges. This is, we don't like this at all. So it's really about power. Who's got the power and who's got the say? Now, in California, they've had the 3 strikes law, and this is cute because there was a guy who, when he was a kid, so he's 17, he eggs a car. The car happens to be a Ferrari, and the damage to the paint, because it wasn't discovered in time, the damage to the paint exceeded $800, which made it a felony. Now, the DA was up for re-election, so he says, I want to, he's got to get his stats up, he's got to get his convictions up, he decides he's going to go after this kid. Gets the kid on, what is it, felony, it's damage. I'm a little tired. I'm actually recovering from pneumonia, believe it or not. So I'm a little tired. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm surprised I'm talking as well as I am. I was laid up for about 2 weeks, but it was some kind of felony damage charge. Gets convicted. Gets very little jail time because he's young, but they tried him as an adult. And he's successfully convicted as an adult. Gets some jail time. When he gets out, he goes to a bar. In the bar, there's a fight, and he gets named as being in it. Now, he doesn't need to have thrown a punch. He doesn't need to have done anything. He's just in the bar. And he's named as being in the fight. That's a parole violation. That's another felony. That's 2 felonies. And he's done nothing. The final one, I forget what it wasn't stealing a head of cabbage, but that was another one. It was another reasonably small thing. It was a felony, and he was looking at life in prison. Life in prison for egging a car and being in a bar fight. That's it.
Insanity.
And the reason is because of the 3 strikes law. If you get convicted of 3 felonies, it doesn't matter what they are. It's life in prison.
But wasn't it originally designed to be violent? The way I remember the 3 strikes law, the way it initially was promoted was these had to be serious violent offenses. They weren't for what you were describing, right? They weren't for property damage or things of that nature. They were to sequester an individual that they determined was going to be violent to society. Now, how to change from that to what it is now? Because I've heard horror stories. Again, I live in California, of people similar that have stolen a slice of pizza and ended up getting life in jail, and very similar drug offenses that are now legal in California. As you know, marijuana is now perfectly legal in California. That people are receiving sentences for that. So how do they justify this?
Well, they can't. What happens is a lot of these cases, and that's why 3 strikes is sort of finally being overturned. The legislators behind it say roughly, well, you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. Yes, you're going to get some situations where there are problems, but it's much better to have the 3 strikes law as a deterrent, sequestration, and all these other things that we've talked about that nobody has any idea what it is we're actually trying to do. It's all these things. You said sequestration. That wasn't originally what they were talking about. Again, the idea was 3 strikes. That's going to get people to not commit felonies. So it was a deterrent at the time, and everybody's opinion on what these laws are supposed to do keep changing, and it's not until the social outrage is high enough, and that really comes with education. That's why these shows are important. It's not until the social outrage is high enough that people begin to do something about this, because it's not there. When did Dick Cheney start to be okay with homosexuality? There's a very fine delineation. Does anyone remember what that is? His daughter came out as gay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She came out lesbian, right? I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was against it until then.
That's such a good point. That is such a good, and it goes to John Boehner too, because how long did John Boehner rally against marijuana and the guidelines with sentencing on that? Now he's couldn't be happier. He's got the biggest smile on his face, and he never did. And by the way, guys, if you need any proof that marijuana can be beneficial to you, look at John Boehner's years as the Speaker of the House, and he cried all the time, right? He gets out of Congress and he goes and he starts smoking a couple of joints. Now the guys can't stop smiling. So it's whatever's going to work in their benefit every time.
Well, it's who you know. Listen, I think it's one of those things. This is why diversity is important. When people talk about, and I did the other thing you guys might be interested in. I did a rant about 2 years ago. I've only done 2 rants. One was on gun control, and the other one was on Trump. And the rants are atypical of how I normally talk. I usually try to be very respectful, including of the other side, and that includes people who voted for Trump. But this rant was the goal. It was a performance piece, and the goal was to be as erudite as possible, and to really provide good arguments for why Trump was quite dangerous, and to be as profane as humanly possible at the same time. You'll find it on my YouTube channel. That rant did really quite well. I was proud of it. But, oh my God, I just lost track of what were we talking about a second ago, right?
We were talking about John Boehner and marijuana before that. Where the line is, where the line of where they're able to be okay with something that they so staunchly not before.
Right.
The conservatives really believe that there's something inherently wrong with diversity because they believe that it has to be forced, and well, to some extent it does. But they believe that what they fail to understand is that there is genuinely something to be gained by connecting with people who have had different lives other than you. And this includes, and this again, so you've been to jail. So people who can talk to you about that experience are going to learn something they've never learned in their lives. And that's an important something. Our worldview is staggeringly small. I mean, really small. We think it's big, and we think, we study and we learn. No, it gets a bit bigger when you travel abroad. You get, this was the other thing about Bush. He had no intellectual curiosity. He had never been outside of the country except to Canada. What was the joke? Even drunk? No, yeah, he hadn't even been to Canada. Even drunk on a dare, you get to Canada. He had never been to Canada. So, there is something to be gained by these experiences. The Norwegian prison system, which I spent a good deal of time studying, and holy smoke. And you had said earlier, you said we're going to separate violent offenders from nonviolent offenders. I think in most cases, if you do it right, you don't even need to do that. I think, so in Norway, maximum prison sentence is 21 years. 21 years. Now, what's his name? Bolkovic. Andreas Bolkovic. That's the wrong name, but it's close. We'll pretend I got it right. He he blew up a car bomb in Oslo, and then he went to that island and started shooting campers. Shot 30 campers. You guys remember that? I mean, this was a huge deal.
I think it was 32. I believe.
Yeah, it may well have been. So he got 21 years in prison. Now, there are people who sit there and say that's outrageous. First of all, they don't just release you at the end of that time. In fact, they don't release anyone when their time is up. They evaluate whether or not these people are dangerous. We don't do that. There is a parole system, but again, once you reach the end of your time, it doesn't matter. But the other thing is, and here's the interesting thing people don't think about, 21 years. All right. I remember talking about Walpole, and I was speaking to a lawyer who had been in Walpole, and he said the thing that he remembered most was he had to sign a waiver as he was going in, and they said, okay, you're going into the common area. Do any of these people want you dead? And he's like, well, I'm a criminal defense attorney. If there's anyone in here that I failed to get off, yeah. I said, okay, we want you to know we don't actually have any control in there. It looks like we got control. We don't have control. They're all armed. Why are they armed? Well, they're allowed razors. I think the ACLU won prisoners the right to have razors to shave, which I agree with, but in our system is a problem. In Norway, they actually have plenty of weapons. They could if they wanted to. But anyways, all of them are armed. They have makeshift shivs. And if one of them decides to kill you, they can get to you long before we can stop you. It's the common area. They really have no control there. So you have to sign a waiver, and you have to realize if somebody wants you dead, you're going to die. So the lawyer is sitting there going, I didn't realize this is what it was going to be like when I went to law school. Now
that's definitely a hostile workplace.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so wow, I am having difficulties with my train of thought. Now, if you have life in prison, why not kill someone? Why not? If you have 21 years in prison, there's a reason not to commit more crimes. So one thing that people who set these huge maximums and say you're going to spend life in jail, what they don't realize is if you're talking about trying to get people to not commit crimes, if you're talking about the deterrent effect, once you've given someone life in prison, there is no more deterrent at all. Done, except for possibly the death penalty, which I've spoken to some who would rather it. I mean, what's the point in staying in prison for the rest of your life?
Right.
So
most would.
That's not necessarily a deterrent. Yeah, so that's not necessarily a deterrent. So what's amazing is we keep handing out these life sentences and don't consider the social implications, the damage we do to ourselves. But we also don't consider we've just made an extraordinarily dangerous individual because they got nothing to lose. And even if they're in theory in the confines of jail, here's one. Okay, there's a guy, he's in the book, Dog Napper. Dog Napper, he was cute. So he was in for domestic violence, drugs, a few other things. He's in Walpole. He needs money for the cantina. Doesn't know how he's going to get it. He's got no family sending it to him. So he goes through the newspapers and starts looking for advertisements or lost dog. And finds a family that's lost a dog, sends them a letter, and says, I have your dog, and if you send me $100 care of Walpole P.O. Box, you'll get him back. And he just starts sending these out every week, and all of a sudden he's got more money in the cantina than absolutely everybody else. And if you don't think that these people can't reach outside and do considerable damage, and there was nothing anybody could do. There was nothing anybody, so they gave him the nickname Dog Napper, and everyone just sort of watched as he goes around telling people he's stolen their dog.
That's creepy.
Yeah, that is creepy. But they can pay to have you assassinated. They can pay to, and now this they can. They learn. Most of them end up having to join gangs. That's the only way to protect themselves. They join a gang that's already there because they're going to be picked on by another gang if they're by themselves. And then those gangs all have connections on the outside. So there is zero way to keep these guys inside the walls 100%. So what you have to do is figure out how you're going to make it so that they're interested in being productive members. And by the way, you're going to fail. You're going to fail with some of them, of course. I'm going to go back to the idea you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. Yeah, you're going to fail. But I would much rather be rehabilitating people, giving people hope that they can get out, that giving them skills, life skills. So again, Norway, first of all, open prisons, no barbed wire, lots of open areas. They have woodworking with chisels, with hacksaws, and the guards aren't worried. One of the reasons the guards aren't worried, everyone there has something to lose. Nobody is in there for life. Violence, people aren't interested in violence. And the guards, the other thing is, and this is where we sort of turn our eyes. I remember Jeffrey Dahmer. I remember, it's a bit morbid, but I'm sitting there trying to figure out, okay, what's the over-under on how long before he's killed? And it wasn't going to be long, and the reason was because the guards were going to intentionally turn around and make sure that something happened to him, because nobody likes Jeffrey Dahmer. Well, I don't like him either, but he's got rights. And if you're not going to protect his rights, you're not protecting anybody's rights. And same thing with Whitey Bulger. Oh, that was, and I'm sitting there going, there's going to be an accident. Now, here's the thing. When the criminals inside know that this is expected of them, that they're going to have permission, that the guards are going to, and if the guards don't like an inmate because an inmate's been acting up, that inmate is going to end up in a common area being told by the guards, oh, he snitched you out or he did this, and the guards are constantly playing the prisoners against each other. So the first thought that crosses their minds is, yep. But then what's going through your mind is, how are they any different from me? How are they any different from me? Because they want me to go commit murder. Yeah.
I said that. Well, I didn't see any instances where they were, they were taking an inmate to a place where he was going to get, into. But I saw, I don't know how many times them bring in things. It's easier for you to get drugs in prison than it is outside of prison.
I still can't wrap my head around that though. How that has us even.
It's so lackadaisical. It's so lackadaisical. They would bring it in all the time, and I'm not gonna comment on some things that that I saw, just because there were a couple of instances where I have people that I made friendships with, and I'm not gonna put anything on that. But there are so many different things that you would not think. I was the same way. I was like, this can't be real. Like, it can't be like happening like this. But there are two worlds there. You have you do have guards there that are there to do their job. They do their job professionally, and then they go home. There are plenty of guards like that there. But then there are also guards there who are just as cunning, just as ruthless, just as underhanded as the people that they're in charge of looking over. And it's kind of funny to take a step back and just appreciate that that reality that you have going on there. That literally, and the thing is, they have the power over you. So if you were to do one of them wrong, or if you were to try to cross them, it would be your word against theirs. And of course, who are they going to go with? They're going to go with the not the guy who's wearing the orange jumpsuit.
What are What are some of the penalties for if you have confiscated, if they confiscated drugs in your bunk or in your, like, for example, in the military, there is a zero tolerance policy in the military, which again, I think any zero tolerance policy or any mandatory sentencing makes no sense to me. And I've seen zero tolerance go amok, very much so. But in the military, if you have drugs, you're done. You're gone. It's dishonorably discharged. Maybe if you're very, 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 very lucky and you go through NATSAP and some kind of counseling, you might get a general discharge or something like that. But your life is over as you know it, pretty much. But in the that's one thing in the military. But in prison, what is the penalties if they found, like, for example, drugs on you?
If they found drugs, it'd be charged. You would be arrested, or not really arrested because you're already there, but they would a deputy would come down and bring charges against you there. Like that's a zero tolerance. It doesn't matter for what reason. If you have drugs there, they're going to charge you for what you have in your possession. With things like tobacco, because that's the biggest commodity there at prison. Tobacco is king. Like that's what everybody wants, and that's what everybody can't have. And so that's where you get your food from. That's where everybody's trading their food for. And that's the biggest thing that's coming in. Now with that, it's up to the individual guard's discretion. So everybody had their kind of guard that they were cool with, so that when they were working your block, you were cool to smoke, as long as you didn't do it blatantly in front of them, like just stand there talking to them with a cigarette in your mouth. Some of them were cool about it. Now there were also people who would hide, like guards who would hide like behind trees and wait for prisoners to take a loop around the bin and stop where the truck can't see you and light up a cigarette, and boom, they've got you. Now when that happens, you get a write-up form, and it's called a B-16. I got 8 B-16s while I was there, and which is
like a shot. What do they call it, a shot? Is that what that is?
Yes, it can be, but for a completely different reason. Basically, what would happen is you would get your write-up form, and then you would go in front of the captain. The captain would have 2 choices that he can do. He can dismiss the thing outright, give you a stern talking to and let you go, or he will find you guilty and he'll take disciplinary action against you. Now, the disciplinary action can be that you lose your phone calls, you lose access to commissary for a week, you lose visits, or it can be as drastic as they're going to take your game time, which is the time that you work for, the days that you work for. They'll take all that off. They'll null that out, and you have to serve your entire. I've seen that happen so many times where they made people serve out their entire sentence just for
that would make you go crazy. As somebody, I'm telling you, when you're, and again, I can only put myself in the military position, so forgive me for doing that, but it's the only analogy that I have. Your free time, your game time, your commissary, your phone calls those were like the golden things. I mean, you take those away, you're just dehumanizing. Yeah, you cannot imagine how long will people wait just to have a phone call, right? And so. Yeah, these things. This is almost like a cruel and unusual punishment kind of thing, because people have to have these types of things. Well, I mean, it is to me, like, morally, right? I will say morally. Now, legally, it's not.
It is. Yeah. Fair point. Yeah. No, it's absolutely.
So I have to differentiate between
it's a violation of human rights.
Legally and morally. Do I think it's unethical? Yeah, I think there's a lot of efficacy issues to be dealt with, and I do like moral philosophy. So I'm on board with that 100%. As somebody who's experienced it, especially the commissary, oh my God, when you get a pack of Fritos or something like that, and you haven't had anything for a long time, that you savor every goddamn chip. Luckily, when I was in, you could smoke. You can't smoke in the military now on board ship. So
what's fucked up? And then I'm Nicholas. I'll let you speak to the rest of it on your end, but one of the most fucked up things I saw was that there was a guard there that we knew was bringing in. He would get painted outside of the facility, through family members or whatever, but he would bring in the tobacco. That same one is one of those that would wait to nail you to the wall. No. For a B-16. And to me, the only way that I can justify it is so that it takes away suspicion from him. You know what I mean? Like, almost like, well, why would you go after people if they knew that you were bringing stuff in? But it's a wild game there. It's its own microcosm of a world, and it's a different world. It is.
What do I? Well, on any one thing, I mean, I'll say one thing just because it is very important to me. The U.S. prison system is a violation of human rights. Period. Um, let's start with the most basic. If you're going to incarcerate someone, you become responsible for their physical well-being. The rape rates in prison are staggeringly high. Stabbings, injuries, beatings, none of that should be tolerable. And again, especially because they can't vote. Criminals can't vote. Ex-cons cannot vote. And that's a serious problem because they can't enforce their rights. And we really do. And this is amazing. And every now and then this ties into Christianity and atheism, because you cannot be a Christian and approve of our prison system in any way. And the number of Christians who say, I've heard and I've spoken with, and they say, well, you know, they're violent offenders. What did they think was going to happen when they got into prison? Well, you know, I thought, you know, as you do to the least among us, you do to me. And prisoners are the least among us. And they're the ones who have no rights. Once you are in jail, it is the responsibility of the state or the federal government to ensure your safety, period. No discussion. And they don't. And they take pride in not doing it. And that is considered part of the punishment. No. You want to increase punishments? Fine. We can talk about ways of doing that. I think that's a really bad idea, but we can talk about it. But one thing you don't do is violate human rights. There is no difference between putting someone in a prison where you know that bad things are going to happen to them, or you allow bad things to happen to them. There's no difference between doing that and taking them yourself and torturing them. It's torture by proxy. Completely unacceptable.
Another thing that I wrote down, that this is the main one for me, and I think we could probably do an entire just an entire full episode on this alone. And there's so many different ways that I'll tell you the ones that impacted me, and then you can speak to the general basis over. But the fact that prisons make a profit. Now, I can't stress enough how much the money aspect of prison is its biggest sin. Like, hands down, what they do, not only to the actual inmates that are in there, but the families that are involved. I've got 4 points that I want to kind of hit on. And number one, when you leave prison, when I left prison, when I got out on May the 8th, I'm sorry, June the 8th. I got out on June the 8th. I walked up to the where the gatehouse was, and there's an office there. You have to go and you have to sign. Then you get your change out of clothes, like your family. They bring you your clothes to change into so you can leave. So I'm changing. I'm putting on my shirt, and the guard comes around and hands me a piece of paper. And this piece of paper is a printout sheet, almost like you would get at a hotel. It tells you how many days that you were here, and how much they charged you per day to be there. And I was there for 367 days, and it was I think it was like $48 what it wound up coming to. $8 of which is a bed tax. Now, what I slept in every night was nowhere. It could be called nothing close to a bed. It was a steel box with a piece of fabric over top of it. But that 40, Steve, you have a calculator on you real quick? Can you figure out what that 48 times 367 is? So I left
$17,616.
Okay, so $17,000. All right, so I was already.
Was that $48? Is that $48 or 48 cents?
$48.
Yeah, $48 times 367 is $17,616. Wow.
And I will say this off the top. In a lot of cases, this can be negated or reduced or worked off. Not in all cases, but in some cases it is part of their their sentencing or whatever. It depends on the situation. But whatever the cost is, you're leaving there owing something, right? already on top of that, you have to agree that you will have a job within 90 days. You have parole. Yeah, for real. No, this is why I get pissed off about
I'm
this.
laughing, and I know you know why I'm laughing, but for anyone who doesn't, how are you going to get a job? Who's going to want to hire you? You probably don't have a license. You probably can't get one. You probably can't. The number of documents that either you're going to have difficulty signing or have to sign with addendums makes getting a job. Oh, wow. Oh my God!
This is what's going to piss you off, though, and this is why I shake whenever I start talking about this. Do you know how many people that I was locked up in there with? Decent people, like good people, and I was one of those people that I had the stigma of prisoners before I went. Before I was one, I would have thought differently about prison, like that they were somehow different than me. You don't, I don't think, appreciate it until you're there and you get to spend time with them. They're not bad people at all. They didn't have anybody to tell them they could do any different, and they got caught up.
A number aren't,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. But so many people were there because of this word, probation violation. So many people are in prison because of this. And here's where they got it. So when you leave and you get that bill that says you owe this for staying here, and you have 90 days to get a job, and that you also have every month the state assessed parole fees, probation fees, supervising fees, drug testing fees, all of this stuff that the state's not going to pay for, you're going to pay for it, even though you're just now getting out of jail. If you don't get a job within that 90 days and you have somebody that's looking over your case that goes, I don't think you made that much of an effort, even though you may have been out every single day looking for a job. All it takes is that one caseworker to go, it doesn't seem to me like you're really serious, you're not taking an issue with it. Probation violation, because you did not meet the requirements that you signed up to do when they released you. So that puts them back in prison. And guess what? Nothing happens to that bill they already owe. So then they start tacking on another bill
you're gonna get interest,
they get when they leave. And they owe both of these now. And then when they try to go get a job again, guess what happens? They get locked up again because they can't. It's a hole that people get up. So when someone says, oh, they just go to prison all the time, it's just a revolving door. Yep, sometimes that happens. But a lot of the times it's because they can't, they literally can't get out of the hole that the state and the federal prison system has dug and thrown them in.
Yep, and nobody cares. That's the problem, is nobody cares. And I think you hit the nail on the head, and it's sort of what I meant with the Dick Cheney example earlier, which is the problem is, okay, I get a little frustrated when people sit there and say Adolf Hitler was a monster. I do. Somebody should time how long it took before Adolf Hitler came up on this conversation. I get frustrated when they say he was a monster. And here's why. Because he was a human being, like you, like me. We like to say he was a monster because that makes us feel better about ourselves and make us feel like we couldn't possibly be capable of what he did or what the Germans did. And if you take a look at the Stanley Milgram experiment, which is one of the most famous experiments in human psychology, you can get just about anyone to do some pretty terrible things. And you can look up that experiment. I can get into it later if you're curious.
Well familiar with
that
that
experiment. That was
the greatest experiment ever done, actually.
Yep. So, he wasn't a monster. I really wish he was. I wish he was. He was a human being and had the same blood that I had. And when you realize that, yeah, well, and then here's the thing.
He wasn't a monster.
Yeah, well, I suppose there is context to it, but the point that I'm trying to make is so many people, when they say that, they're trying to dehumanize him, which I want to do, but it makes it very easy for fascism to rise again because you keep thinking you're immune to it. Anyone can drop a bomb on a gook, a chink, any of these, and we use racial slurs to dehumanize people. That is the specific purpose of those. It's a lot harder to drop a bomb on a Chinese person. So that's why we have those slurs. Convicts, it's the same thing. And we dehumanize them. And we do it so that we don't have to think about. It's a little bit of a scary process thinking about how do we fix prisons. And we know it's going to cost a lot of money, and wouldn't it be better to put that money into health care or children's lunches or something like this? And when you take a look at the real cost of what's happening with prison systems, I mean, it could potentially bankrupt this country. And the reason is because when you end up creating more monsters, when you end up creating these people that are incapable of functioning and they go out and they commit more crimes and things get worse, when you have a system based on revenge, which is really what our system is, it's much more about you've committed a crime and we are going to somehow avenge ourselves upon you. You get out, you are going to want to hurt other people. The book Confessions of a Sin Eater, which again was that memoir, in the first chapter was the first day of my friend's tenure at, he was actually at the time at minimum security, Addison prison. And a guy was being released who just lost it as he was coming out. And he said, you know, I'm not a human being anymore. I've been raped so many times, I can't feel a thing. And I swear to God, the first thing I'm going to do when I go out is I am going to take it out on one of those people who think that they can get away with putting me in here and not suffering any fucking consequences. And that's what he did. And he was back in Walpole 2 years later for raping and killing someone. Now, he started out at minimum and upgraded to maximum. Why? Because he wasn't taken care of and because he was turned into a monster. And you can only do that to other human beings that aren't people. And so it goes to what you had said earlier. We don't think of cons, ex-cons, and even that term is probably derogatory, as people. The fact that they can't vote and that people are okay with this, you have to realize they're human beings and American citizens first. That means the Constitution applies. And if you're going to say they can't vote, there has to be some kind of due process as to why there is, and nobody's got any. Nobody's got any. There's no reason.
Well, my question is this: if there's some kind of restorative nature for these criminals, and they've paid their dues to society. The whole point of is to have somebody be incarcerated. Supposedly, one of the points, it could be multiple, but to pay back some kind of perceived debt to society. Now, if that's the case, and they've gone through it and they've done that, and they've gotten out, why is there still a detachment of the non-ability to vote? Now, I can understand why they're incarcerated. I get that. I find with suspending of certain liberties when you're incarcerated, just like when in the military, you suspend certain liberties, your property of the government at that point. But once you're out, why is it still that position that you can't have the ability to vote? Why I don't understand once a felon always have that inability to vote, because it makes no sense to me if the whole point of incarceration, a point to pay that debt to society. Yes.
Can I tell you what I think real quick? Mine's very quickly, because I think that they know that it's not designed to rehabilitate, that they put that narrative out there because it sounds good. Sure. It's warm and feeling. But what they want is they want to put you away in a concrete box and throw away the key until it's time for you to get out. And then when you get out, they don't want people like you trying to influence politics and society.
Change the system.
But the main narrative that goes out is, oh yeah, it's reform. There's nothing about prison the way it stands out. Zero, zip, nada that is in any way rehabilitative. Nothing.
I completely could agree with that.
So here's the I do think, and I assume you guys know something about the Norwegian system, but I think it's something that you should really look at. And they've accepted something that's difficult to accept, but I think you need to. Now, here's another thing. I'm actually, I do have a sort of a wide range. I'm a licensed teacher, so I taught high school for a little while. And one of the things you learn dealing with kids, and the basic human psychology, but it has to, as a parent raising children, and it's not just I've trained dogs, Training dogs, you learn this. It's real simple. If you want to change their behavior, you cannot avenge or revenge yourself upon whatever the behavior is. If the dog pooped on the floor, if the kid, hurt another kid, punched another kid. An eye for an eye really does leave everyone blind. There is no such thing as making up for or revenging yourself upon someone and having that change the behavior. What that does is that instills anger. What you need to do is find a way to correct the behavior. Now, in Norway, let's assume for a second that your child is raped and murdered. I've got to tell you, taking a look at the prisons that they have there, which are closer to hotel accommodations, they get an Xbox, they get televisions, they get classes on how to cook, how to do their taxes, they get basketball time, they get woodworking, they get all this stuff. I would be pissed as hell because I would want to see pain visited back on that person. But when you do that, you increase the chances that they are then going to go out and do that again. You are not making them a better person. The choice you have, I'm sorry to say, is do you avenge yourself upon them, or do you find a way to change the behavior to make the matters better? You can't.
Yeah,
do both.
I don't think
that's
a tough question.
Yeah, no, it can't. It's tough, and it's easy for me to say, and that's one reason why it has to be done collectively, because I don't think any one individual is really strong enough. But I have two people on my wall, two portraits. The first, the second actually is Christopher Hitchens, who I'm a huge fan of. Disagreed with how he did some things, but huge fan of. The first is Martin Luther King Jr. And Martin Luther King Jr., when I talk about atheism, one of the things I say is that atheism is actually a civil rights issue. We are oppressed by the religious, but our response cannot be. Too many atheists online that I have found think that humiliation is a good way to educate, that making the other side look bad is somehow going to make them rethink their positions. No, it's going to entrench the position in most cases. And it's going to make them say, wow, atheists are jerks. Even if he's right, I don't want to join him. And I think the next step for anti-theists is to approach it as a civil rights issue and to approach it much more like Martin Luther King Jr. and say, listen, we're brothers. I understand that it hurts. It hurts like hell to abandon the idea of God. But here are reasons why you have to realize all the damages and so on and so forth. At any rate, the idea of I do think that I've been injured by Christians, and I would like to make them look bad. I'd like to take them out as fools for believing in fictitious. None of that accomplishes what I consider to be the principal goal, which is to end religion. That's accomplished more by caring and genuine engagement. It's the same thing. It's Martin Luther King had it right, and here he was able to take being in one of the worst positions you could be in and still be technically a free person, and able to force whites to look at their own privilege. And I think it's the same thing here, where we say, do we want to get revenge, which is going to make matters worse, or do we want to rehabilitate, which doesn't feel good? You sit there and say, I was really wrong to, but has a much better outcome. And so far we've chosen A.
Yeah, I think we all have human desires to have vengeance and revenge. It's just human nature. I get that. However, being somebody who does try to have more of a virtue ethics approach, I think that one of the goals people should have is to try to overcome that. And I don't think there's any benefit to actually having vengeance as far as infliction of pain, especially physical pain. I get the need to punch somebody. Don't get me wrong. And sometimes don't get me wrong. I understand that, but when you like torture, I don't believe in torture at all when it comes to criminality. When people are in prison, that needs to just we cannot torture people. It's uncivilized. It makes us less of humans, I think. However, when it comes to what you're saying about the entrenchment effect and the backfire effect, which I've been a big advocate of what you've said. Now I understand. There are times for mockery. Flat Earth, I'm going to mock. I'm sorry, but I'm not, because my goal is not to change the mind of the flat earther. It's to provide entertainment for the people listening and to get people to not be a flat earther, right? So I mock certain things like young Earth creationism, and I do mock flat Earth. However, when it comes to religion, I made a video with Cyrus the Skeptic on this very topic because I see a lot of people mocking Christians as far as like using volatile terminology like Sky Daddy and Sky Fairy, and I get that. I really do. Never. I do get it. Don't get me wrong, but it does have a backfire effect. I've seen it happen, and it doesn't provide for a very conducive dialogue. So there is this position that what your end goal is going to be determinant of how you are approaching the dialectic. So if your goal is to convince the theist, that's not the way to go about it. If that's not your goal, then do what you will. But would you agree that when I see a lot of anti-theists, or actually I shouldn't say anti-theists. Anti-theists aren't the ones really doing it. It's the atheists who have this not mockery narrative rather than education. Because when you ask a lot of the atheists, well, what are your positions as far as why do you believe that you do? What is your position against religion? They have no justification really. It's all just form mockery and memes. Hey, you're a Christian. Let me show you this funny meme about Jesus, rather than explaining to them. These are why I don't think your positions are sound. They don't know enough. But so, do you agree there is a backfire and entrenchment effect when people do that kind of mockery?
I agree. The backfire effect is technically that's actually usually referred to as and oh God, I've seen it and it's a nightmare. There is a point at which more evidence that you're wrong actually entrenches you in the position. And I think that's a slight. I agree. I think what happens is, if you mock people, you're going to entrench them. And if you disagree with me, let me ask you what happens when you get mocked. It's a simple. What do you do when people start mocking your beliefs? And if you're starting to doubt those beliefs and people mock you in general, what's your response? And I think most of us, or some of us, would like to say, oh, I really question them. No, in general, what most of us do is we entrench those beliefs because we want to prove the person mocking us wrong. And again, it gets back to education, psychology, and you can see this in children, but it's all human beings. We never grow out of it. But if you have kids and, you catch them doing something, or they say something that's wrong and you correct them, they double down. And they double down because they don't like being made a fool of. And
speaking of,
yes.
Speaking of religion, that's another thing that I think should be. Maybe we'll because we're at the hour and a half mark, but maybe we'll make this the last point we kind of touch on briefly. The religious programs and the things that they have inside of prisons is astounding compared to if you are someone that goes into prison. Either agnostic, atheist, someone that doesn't have a religion, because the one thing that you want to do is you want to get out of boredom and the mundane. Any type of stimulation, like it's over amplified in prison. Like the smallest things, smells, interaction with people coming in from outside, coming to do different talks or whatever. All that's heightened, and so you begin to look for things to do to get out of either your dormitory or whatever. And what I thought was just appalling is churches around the area use the prison as it's just a breeding ground for more new Christians, because they come in every day with either a sermon or worship service or whatever. And what does that do? That causes everybody to want to get out of what they're doing and go to it. So you're literally, you have a monopoly on the, I guess the ideology would be the best way to put it. But if you're somebody that doesn't believe, like an atheist, or you're agnostic, you just stay where you are. You don't get out. You don't get to go to anything that's designed for you. You just stay there and hang by yourself. So what do you see?
Don't they have atheist groups in prison now? I thought they were covered under the same.
They're starting to do now because we talked to Monica. We talked to Monica Miller several months ago, and she was in the middle of a case here in North Carolina where she was suing to allow an atheist student to have a secular type program, but they're having to sue for it. The state's not providing that to them actively now.
That makes no sense to me. Why should they have to sue for something that always has been a right? I mean, if people have a freedom to have a religious congregation, atheism has been determined under the Supreme Court to have the same protections. Not that the atheism is a religion. Atheism is not a religion. I will fight to the death on that particular issue. Okay, and I'm the one that usually goes against the grain. I'm the one that pisses off atheists. But atheism is not a religion. It makes no sense to even say that. Right. But atheism is covered under the same protections as religion. As well, just should be. So I don't know why they would have to sue for that. I've started being determined by the Supreme Court. Yeah,
they had to do that in the Army too. The Army, they were looking for. There was a atheist who wanted to be a chaplain, and they had to sue. Mm-hmm. And oh my God! And the only way at first to get it was to say that it was a religion. And I think they got it in under that, but it's not, and they had to keep fighting. And theists who really detest atheists enjoy sitting there saying, "Well, it's not a religion, so it's not covered by freedom of religion." Oh boy, is that a technicality? Thank God Barack Obama recognized that problem.
Yeah, this is when it goes to this is when it goes to concepts rather than semantics, and people have to understand. Yeah. That just because atheism is not a religion, that is only a semantic difference. The concept of religion, have freedom to do so, is to practice what you believe, or if some people want to say atheism is a lack of belief, which people know I'm not a fan of, but if even still, it's to allow you to hold any kind of position one way or another and not have any influence from the government. And so if people want to have atheism, that's what it is. It's the same protection. It's the concept thing. It doesn't matter whether atheism is religion or not, because it's not, but it still has to have the same protections.
Well, fortunately, that's now becoming increasingly recognized, although in 6 states, the state's constitutions bar you from serving public office. In Texas, if you can look it up, it's the 4th article. Yeah, so I mean, 6 states. If you're an atheist, it's clear discrimination. Yeah. Oh, it absolutely is. Yeah. But to answer the question, it started with Islam, and it started actually 50 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, what most people don't realize is the Quran was written after he died. So people who sit there and say this is the word of Muhammad, well, that's what people say the word of Muhammad is, and the thinking is that martyrdom in particular was never something that he endorsed or even thought of. It was added after to the Quran because Islam was going to get wiped out if they didn't find a way to get new fresh blood in it. When you add the concept of martyrdom, which is to say that if you die furthering the religion, you go straight to heaven regardless of what your sins are, that helped bolster the religion. It's probably what saved it. Islam has had the most success in prisons in getting converts, probably largely for that reason, but they've also been a lot more serious about it. And the people who are constantly trying to convert me, it's all Muslims. I get Muslims at least once a week on Twitter who are really, and they're very patient and they're very serious about converting me, and they're practiced and they know what they're doing. And so they take prisons very seriously, and shortly after their success, I think the Christians started doing it too. In Walpole, they had Mother Teresa came, and she washed the feet of all the prisoners, and they loved it. And I'd have thought that prisoners wouldn't take it seriously, but I think it's what you said earlier. I think they get, they're so bored, and they're looking for anything. And here's somebody who truly, I mean, she just sat there, she's unarmed, she's not, and she's just giving, and she's, yes, please.
Let me tell you, it's baffling to watch. Like, it's almost like crusades happen every, I went to one service when I was there, and that's because the only reason that I went was because the church was handing out these huge bags of candy after it was over. So I went to go. I know that's horrible to do, but I remember just taking a step back and watching, and you would have thought that all of them had been Bible-believing Christians. They go to church every Sunday, every Wednesday. They're crying. They got their hands up in the air. They're singing.
Mass murderers. Mass murderers will do that.
Yeah, I'm with these people every day. I hear what they're talking about when they're out on the yard, when they're they're lifting weights, all this other bullshit. All of this is for fucking show, and it was sickening to me. I mean, I literally almost got sick just watching it, because I'm like, you were just talking about banging your sister's or your girlfriend's sister. I mean, none of these people none of them walked the way that they were supposed to if they were Christian. They just got in here so that they could, I guess, it's some kind of psychological way to absolve themselves of any kind of guilt or whatever. But I just never had that inclination to just go there and try to sink myself into something that I felt could take away any type of responsibility that I had.
I don't know if it's that may be it. You would probably have better insight into that than I, because I never actually witnessed it. I've heard the stories, and I've heard stories of people who have committed just utter atrocities, and all of a sudden, but yeah, days later they're right back to normal. I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, Mother Teresa visited, but did she actually convert anybody? I don't think so. But it was a good PR stunt. Yeah, and it works, at least in the short term. I mean, it seems to have, but I mean, I don't know. That's
what can you do?
Yeah.
Here's my last question to you, Nicholas, on this. Are we too far gone in this country? Have we broke things so much that any type of way to go back and try to fix any of these points that we've talked on tonight, is that practical? Is that realistic? Is there anything we can do to get on track, or are we just fucked, for lack of better word?
Absolutely fixable. Absolutely fixable. The biggest thing it needs, well, not the biggest thing, but the first one I'll talk about, the most immediate, is money. Again, to get back to Norway, they pay twice as much per prisoner than we do. Now, you sit there and say, oh my God, well, we don't want to do that. Of course we don't want to do that. We're a capitalist society. And this gets back into, and this would actually dovetail into some of the points I've made about Ayn Rand, and why you cannot privatize jails. What most people don't realize, and you get into arguments about privatization and socialization versus socialization. 1835, fire departments in this country were privatized. And what that meant was, and every now and then a state or a town plays with the idea of privatizing it, and it goes horribly wrong. What they did was, you had to buy fire insurance ahead of time, and then you got a marker. Usually it was a shield or something like that you put near your house. The fire department would come. If they saw it, they'd put the fire out. If not, they'd sit there and drink and watch the house burn down. And that was a private fire department. Now, 1835, fire breaks out in a house in New York. Fire department shows up, no badge, no shield. They just watch it burn. It catches the next house on fire. That also did not have a shield, so they let that burn. It also catches a house one back on fire. They let that one burn because there's no. The fourth house had a badge, so they tried to put it out. But by that point, the fire was way, way, way too big. And that caused one of the largest fires in New York history. 700 buildings burned to the ground for a fire that could have been put out right then and there at the first house, but they refused to do it. First house, and instead, 700 houses. Now,
I know that story.
That's yeah. So, you're going to have the same. You cannot privatize social services, and that's precisely the reason why. And that includes healthcare, which we have privatized. But you see the effects of it. You can't privatize police, and you can't privatize fire. We have, fortunately, socialized those. That's a terrible word, but I think you know what I mean by that. But we still have a privatized healthcare. You cannot privatize the prison system. That's a social service. Okay. They pay twice as much in Norway, and that seems like a lot, but that's per prisoner. They pay a lot less in the end because they pay less for police once they get out, because you have fewer crimes. They have a recidivism rate of 20%. We get up as high as 70%. So what do you think you're paying for outside when they do damage? When an arsonist gets outside and burns another house down? What are the damages that you're not thinking about that we're actually paying besides the cost per prisoner here? Now, if it's going to take a huge injection of money to improve prison conditions. You have to protect every prisoner 100%. There can't be any stabbings. There can't be any shootings. There can't be any bullying. You can't have any of this. You have to, and you're sitting here probably saying to yourself, okay, yeah, I agree, but how? Where's the will to do it? Right now, there isn't much. But the good news is, as bad as it is, we do have the money to do it, and it is worth the investment. And that's what it is. It's an investment. It's an investment in the future of our citizens, a disenfranchised section of a group of citizens called ex-cons who deserve the right to be treated just like everybody else. It's really, there's no difference. They have a different life path than me. That's it. They should have every other right and the same civility and treatment. We don't have that. There are countries that do, so we know it can be done. It's a question of so the big thing we need is the will. We need people to realize that it's a problem. If you're Christian, you have to accept that it's a problem, because you should not be willing to tolerate. Jesus wouldn't have tolerated this. What would Jesus have said or done? So, when I talk to Christians, I enjoy talking to Christians about this because I have an in to say. But if you want to talk to anybody and sit there and say, what's the cost? Take a look at the violence we have in this country. Wouldn't you like to see that go down? What's the cost to you and your family if something goes wrong? And if it goes wrong with someone that could have been prevented if they hadn't have been exposed to the level of, I hear people telling me about violent video games. The problem is violent video games. If violent video games are increasing crime in this society, what happens when a non-violent offender goes into a violent prison? Do you think that's going to increase crime in this society? Do you think having warehouses of people who are teaching each other how to commit crimes and a life of crime and how to operate? And you had said something. You had said it's a different world. It is. And that's a problem. It should be as close to this world as possible. The fact that you're separated from your entire life should be punishment enough, or it should be enough of, that's what we are pulling you out of society. You are sequestered, but you're taken care of, you're well fed, you are educated, and we try to improve your life so when you go back, you become a more productive member of society. Convincing people that that's the way to do it, and it's hard because people do want to double down. People are trying to double down on the tough on crime. Bill Clinton was big on tough on crime, actually, for a liberal. He wasn't as big as many of the Republicans, but he said he had two major regrets when he got out of office. The first was he left the killing of Osama bin Laden to the next president. He had a plan to do it. He assumed the next president would take the plan seriously. Bush took one look at this and said, who cares about terrorism? And didn't do it. And Clinton could have started the plan, but he said, no, I'll leave it to the next president. That was his first regret. His second regret was taking tough on crime seriously and not trying to reverse that process, because he realized it was a terrible problem. So it's going to take a significant investment. It's going to take treating it seriously. It's going to take getting people to understand that, again, these are our brothers in jail. These are other Americans. They're citizens just like me. They have families just like me. They have people who care about them. And it takes us connecting with them on a human level and demanding that this be done. But because we have this ingrained that it's really okay whatever happens to them once they get back there, and that's part of the process, that has to be changed. And I think that's done by programs like this, that's done by talking about it, and that's done by educating and coming into contact with people and saying, why are we doing this? And it's starting to happen, but it'll happen, but I think it's going to take a while. I think it's going to take, but I'm hoping in the next 10 years you're going to start to see some, I'm hoping in the next 10 years you're going to start to see some. The problem is it's doable. It just takes money, and that's the thing. Private prisons aren't going to want to invest the money. They're going to want to do the opposite. So going private is a catastrophic idea. Absolutely catastrophic.
You alluded to something earlier a second ago where you said that you how you leave prison, and I want to make this point. The way that our prison systems are set up now, people on the outside think that you go, and the idea is that you go to prison and you leave a better person. But the reality of the situation is you go and you leave a better criminal, because you talk to people who have been in it longer than you have, who, when you're the first thing everybody does when you get there is everybody wants to know about your case. Let's see your let's see your papers. Let's see what you got. Let's see what, somebody missed. There are guys that I've been in prison with that have been in prison for like 40 years who know the law better than any lawyer that you could throw at them. Like, they are able to they can read your papers, show you what you missed. When you go to court the next time, what you need to bring up. You go there and you trade these secrets. Like, people will trade, next time do this or try this or say this. So you don't leave you leave a better criminal ultimately. But I want to point out too that if there's anybody, I know that I've been watching the live chat and there's been several comments about how this is infuriating and it should be like this. There are things that you can do. There are programs. There are information. There's information out there. I'm gonna link the website. His website should already be linked down below, but I'm gonna link the YouTube channel too. You can find out information there. But there's also simple things that you can do. Courtney Harold is a Godless Mom on Twitter. She does this amazing program where she does pen pal letters with prisoners, and you can find her on Twitter, and she can tell you all about that. So if you have time to write a letter, one of the best times for an inmate, no matter what, is when the mail comes around. And there were so many instances that I saw people, I was lucky in there. I have really close friends and family, and I was getting letters and all the time. There are so many people in there that don't get anything, that they have no contact with anyone on the outside. And so they literally are just wasting away in this place. And if you have the time to just sit and, write to somebody and say nothing, you don't have to say anything. You can just ramble on about, what your favorite TV show is, what your hobbies are. Just open up a dialogue. I guarantee you will change somebody's life that day. Guaranteed. You can't put out into words that kind of loneliness when you're isolated like that. And to see some of these guys' faces when mail's being passed out and they don't get anything, it's a huge deal. So I think what she does is amazing. And if you can support her in that, please do. It will drastically change somebody's life.
I just add real quick. This is one of the topics that I actually changed my position on. A while back, we had this kind of similar discussion on the privatization of prisons, and looking more into it and actually listening to Kyle's arguments. I actually changed my position on this. I actually agree that I don't think that privatization of prisons makes sense, and I think it is probably overall more detrimental than any benefit that people could possibly think that comes from it. So people can change their position. I mean, good argumentation will do that. And I do believe now, looking more into it, because again, I didn't have all the facts. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense to me to privatize certain things, prisons definitely being one of them. And I even mentioned before that I have VA. VA is socialized medicine. I mean, and it may not be the best system, but it's better to have that than none. So, yeah.
And it's very close to the system that every member of Congress has. So it's good enough for Congress. It's good enough for our military, but it isn't good enough for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, this was fantastic. This ended way too quickly. I have 6 more things that I wanted to bring up. The other big one, I guess, if you would be interested in coming back sometime, I would love to have you.
Absolutely, I'd love to. I enjoyed this very much. I would love to come back.
Talk about the effects of solitary confinement on inmates, because that's a world unto its own, and I've seen the effects of that.
Yeah. I will actually tell you, I'm a little bit for solitary confinement, but in a bit of a different way. Because here's the thing, that's what the Quakers do. It's what the Quakers do, and it works. And it's essentially solitary confinement. It's shunning. I mean, all of a sudden, boom, you are isolated from the rest of the... It's solitary confinement. But I'm for it at 1/10 to 1/100th of the, I mean, I think solitary confinement for 3 days is a staggering experience. I don't think it's an experience that's going to destroy you, but it's an experience where you come out and you've changed how you look at the fact that you are a member of society. Now, I'm talking 3 days. So I am for solitary confinement, but not
No, that makes
3
sense.
days.
Yeah. 3 days is
I
not
can
3
see,
weeks or
like,
3 months.
yeah,
Yeah.
3 days. I have seen
right.
guys. I've seen guys there that when I got there, there was one guy that got into a. I mean, they were using locks in socks and having a brawl. And I mean, it was just a bloody. It was a bloodbath. But he beat this guy up really bad. But I remember watching him getting taken into solitary confinement. It was 4 months later when he got out, and he was not there anymore. I mean, he had checked out mentally. He didn't talk to anybody. He didn't get up off his bunk. He was not the same person that went in there. And I don't think that it is right at all. Like 3 days to me, I don't think that, like, that would be a vacation. There would be times where I wish they would send me to solitary confinement for 3 days so I could get away from all the noise. You know what I mean? Like, just have 3 days.
Yeah.
Chill out.
Well,
That's
it's a
fine.
self-reflection.
3 days was an example. I wouldn't go.
In a month.
I wouldn't go more than a week. I don't think you can go more than a week. There is no benefit to solitary confinement for more than a week. There actually is a benefit to solitary confinement. It is a very good concept. But there are a lot of things that are good concepts that you can't apply universally and so liberally. So when you say solitary confinement, I do agree with you. I'm completely against it as it's practiced, but it's actually a very good concept. It's rooted in some very good psychology and very good sort of understanding of what we should be doing. But you can't throw a human being into solitary for longer than a week. It's cruel and unusual, and there are reasons for that. And we are social creatures.
I could totally back you up on the 7 days thing. Like, I don't think that would be too detrimental to somebody's health. But the problem is that solitary confinement became a sort of catch-all. I don't want to deal with it. You know what I mean? It was the administration's way of saying, I have a problem here. I don't want to address what the problem is head on. I want to take it and throw it in a further box away from me, and I don't have to deal with it. You feed it 3 days a week. Other than that, you don't worry about it. It just stays in that box. So it's overused.
It is, and it's used to solve problems, actually. So it's not used for the punishment or for the deterrence. It's used to, which actually brings me to one other concept. I'll see maybe if I can impose. But but solitary confinement is used about, depending on the prison, anywhere between 30% to 40% of the people in solitary confinement are actually mentally ill. And the problem is there's no way to manage how they are coping with the rest of the population, so you throw them in solitary confinement, either to protect them or so that you don't have to deal with whatever the problem is. Well, that's not a solution. But that's, to be fair to the prison system, that's all they've got the money for. They don't have the mental health services, and if they try to get the mental health services, you think the state or the federal government's going to give it to them? So we end up throwing a lot of mental health people with mental health issues into prisons, and they're either in general population where they're causing a huge problem, or they're in solitary, which is cruel and unusual, and it's just their way of shutting the problem down. Or it's people who are truly violent, and they're like, well, we don't want to risk our guards, so we put them in solitary. Well, that's a very easy solution, but that's not a good one. I will add just one other thing maybe to go on.
Sure.
I don't think there's such a thing as justice. And that may sound, that's just sort of as a philosophical point. If there's such a thing as justice, I've never seen it. If there is a God, he has engineered things such that justice does not exist in this world. That's why people like religion so much, is because of the idea that you get justice afterwards. But there was a guy, I forget which state he was in. I want to say it was Massachusetts, but he, someone broke into his house, tied up him and his family, raped and murdered his kids, but while they were in the process, he managed to escape. He went to a neighbor's house. They managed to call the police. The guy was eventually caught, but his family was all wiped out. What's justice? People sit there and tell me that's putting him in jail or murdering him. No. Justice is this guy gets his family back. Justice is he gets his kids back. They're perfectly fine. He gets his wife back and everything's fine. Justice is he's restored back to the way things were. That's not going to happen. That can't happen. There is no such thing as justice. Once something is broken, you can't unbreak it. So to sit there and say that extra punishment on this guy is somehow going to bring justice or alleviate a situation, it's not. All it does is give you catharsis and revenge. That's a different thing. Justice and revenge are two different things, and I've never seen any good come out of revenge, and that's what our prison system is. It's revenge. You wronged the system, and you had said earlier, Steve, I think that paying your debt to society. I don't believe in debts to society for the most part. There may be a few exceptions, but I don't see it that way because, again, that's sort of, it can't be repaid. Once you've broken it, it cannot be repaid. You could spend your whole life trying to repay it. You can't do it. The question is, what do we do going forward to mitigate things and try to make things as good as possible for all people around? That's a very different way of approaching it. It doesn't sound all that different, but if you start to look at every prisoner, every crime, everybody who's going to jail, everybody who ends up before a judge, and look at it that way instead of saying, how do we avenge ourselves upon you? And that's what we're doing, because you aren't going to get justice. Justice is that person restored, and it's not gonna happen. So it's an illusion. It's something we tell ourselves, and again, it's easy, but it's a problem because we've been taking the easy way out.
There's not one thing that you said tonight that I disagree with. Not one.
No, I'm fully agreeing too.
I got to try harder.
I do think the only thing I will add, I agree with you 100% as well. I will add, though, I think there is a type of restorative justice on a small scale, right? Obviously, if you steal somebody, you can compensate. And so there is a type of restorative justice that works. However, when it comes to the slighting of another human being, that is just impossible to have any recompense. If it's kill your family, rape your friends, just like that. Those things, there is no restorative, obviously. So I think, again, you have to be very careful to determine what types of crimes are being referred to here. And I know going into this, these were things like violent crimes and things of that nature. But I can't just blankly say we can have to get rid of all kind of restorative justice, because the whole point of the legal system is to make people whole in like civil cases, right? That's one of the things that a civil judge will do, is try to make people whole.
I'm not sure I'd concur with that.
That's one of the foundations of civil justice, is the judge wants to look at people's testimonies and try to make somebody whole, especially in any kind of contractual law. That's
sure.
The whole intent.
You pay them.
But
putting them in prison doesn't make them whole.
No.
Yes and no.
I agree.
I think if you talk to any attorney about what is the goal of law, they will tell you it's to stop violence. I've heard from more than one attorney a phrase I like. The job of a judge is to make sure that both sides go away unhappy. And you may think that's flippant. It's not. They want to make sure that people are punished for not being able to solve the problems on their own. There's a reason why when a divorced couple decide to start bringing the law involved and getting the lawyers involved, they end up losing all their money, and nobody on the legal side really cares. It's because they're trying to encourage people to solve problems on their own. And the idea is, if you have some kind of civil dispute with someone, you have two choices. You can go with a baseball bat and try to convince them to give you whatever they owe you to pay you back for the car damage they did to your car, or you can go to court where you have some recompense. But by the way, you'll notice in like the vast majority, probably 95% of court cases, they give you not even the replacement value of the car. They give you a lower value. They give you, and every side walks away unhappy. And that's actually deliberate. And ask any civil lawyer. They want you to say, shoot, I wish we could have found a way to do this without going to court, because at both sides,
well, they have mediation nowadays. They are more mediation than anything else. Yeah.
Yep. But it's not. But the idea is too. At least there's a recourse other than taking a baseball bat. But and that's what it is, because without a court, without law, but that's the purpose of law. It's to stop violence. That's it. It's not even to make things fair or just. The best way to stop the violence is to make things as fair and just as possible. That's true. But that's what a civilization is. That's what laws are. That's the difference between laws and lawlessness. It's the violence, and that's the purpose. We have laws to stop violence. That's it. And that may sound like an extremist view, but I think if you talk to any first-year lawyer at any law school, that's what they'll tell you.
I think there's legitimacy in that. I just don't think that's the whole of the narrative. But there's obviously some legitimacy there. You don't want people taking laws in their own hands. That's why they have civil recourse, right? You don't want people going, "Hey, this person had a slight against me. I'm going to take matters in my own hand and take the law in my own hands and do something to restore myself for property or things of that nature." So there is something to be said for that. However, I do very strongly believe in the principle of restoration as far as making somebody whole. That's one of the foundations of contractual law, is that if we have a contract together and you have broken that contract, and according to the four corner rule, I need to have restitution to make myself whole. That is a cornerstone of contractual law.
Total shill.
It's great.
Yes. Well, listen, I would love to come back on this topic on the economics is another one. I haven't done economics for a while, but that was the whole Ayn Rand thing, and certainly atheism is another one, the Codex. So anytime you guys would like, I would be thrilled to come on. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you, and I appreciate you giving me so much time. Amazing. So thank you.
I think you've been fantastic. This has been one of my. This is a issue that's close to my heart anyway. So anytime I'm able to expound, and call. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up these super chats while I'm talking. I can't do two things at one time. We all know this. I try to bring attention to the this issue. So I appreciate you coming on, and we'll definitely have you back soon, because I do want to hit the Atheist Codex. I think that's cool as hell what you're doing there. But we've got we've got about 6 super chats that we'll read real quick. God's servant says, thank you for the super chat. God is real and his name is Jesus. Be baptized in Jesus' name. Acts 2:38. So you can check that out if you'd like. NZ Pure says,
I'll keep that in mind.
God's not. In response to that, NZ Pure says God's not real and Jesus never existed. So
Jesus did exist.
Okay.
He probably did.
See?
Just because of the lies in the Bible. Oh, I'm sorry. Should I be quiet? There's a
no,
lie in the Bible.
I'm not. We're not mythicists. I'm not a mythicist, and I don't think Kyle is.
This is a very controversial topic around these parts. It tends to trigger one or two sides. So I just think it's hilarious that like if we'd have known this, we probably could have got this in the show about 45 minutes ago, and we would still be talking till midnight.
No. Well, I think that's a good thing. So here's the thing. In Luke, it's not just Luke. It depends on, so Jesus was, first of all, born either in the fall or the spring, if you take the description in Luke. It wasn't born in Christmas. But all that aside, here's the thing. By the time Jesus was born, the census had already ended. So why is there this myth or this fabrication, this lie about the census? First of all, the census was never. You couldn't do the census in the winter because the roads would all freeze. It was you couldn't. Nobody. Not a single emperor did the census in the winter. Augustus had already ended the census, and it was over by 8 years, for a minimum of 8 years by the time Jesus was born. So why is there this story about them traveling and going to Bethlehem? Well, the Messiah has to be born in Bethlehem. Has to be born in Bethlehem. That's it. You cannot get around that. He's not the Messiah if he's not born in Bethlehem. Now, if you're going to invent Jesus, if you're going to invent the story, have him born in Bethlehem. That's where the Messiah is born. But if Jesus was a real person that you're later going to try to paint as the Messiah, that you're later going to try to put into that role, you have to find a way to get this man who unfortunately was born in Nazareth into Bethlehem. How do you do it? Well, you say, hey, he was traveling for the census. Doesn't matter that the census was over. Doesn't matter that it was the wrong period of time. Doesn't matter that Nazareth was exempt from the census. None of those things matter, and whoever wrote this wasn't capable of doing the research to know these things. They just figured, oh, we'll say they were traveling for the census. There you go. So we take a real mad Jewish preacher, drop him from where he was actually born in Nazareth into Bethlehem, so that we can later call him the Messiah. The only reason to make up these lies in the Bible that he was traveling for the census is if he was real. If he was fake,
I've never heard that.
just have him born in Bethlehem.
I've never heard that.
No, I've heard that. No, I've heard that before. But I've heard that Bethlehem is actually. This would be apologetic, so take this for a grain of salt. But the apologetic narrative is that Bethlehem, it's part of like the county of Nazareth would have been in the county of Bethlehem. So it's, even though they're two different cities, they're somehow in the same county. Like it would be saying, well, Riverside
Bethlehem
County
was exempt also.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if that narrative actually works.
So. That's my mythicist argument. Like, to me, ultimately, who cares whether it's just my opinion? Who cares whether he existed or not? If he did, great. He still wasn't God, and if he didn't, great. He's still not God. You know what I mean? So to me, I don't
that's a good point.
Because
it's not a bulletproof argument. I mean, Carrier. I like Carrier a lot. People know he's a great guy. I really enjoyed talking to Carrier. But, you know, even his mythicist argument, he does realize it's not like some nail in the coffin. It's just a probabilistic argument. It's not even a substantial probabilistic argument. It's 1/3 chance he didn't exist. It's 2/3 that he did.
I missed my chance to talk to Carrier.
We don't care.
I wanted to ask Carrier about this specific one, and I missed my chance. I was so disappointed.
Mail it to me. I'll get it to him. I talked to him a lot, actually. I was gonna go meet him.
Well, I mean,
San Diego.
I mean, we're friends on Twitter and Facebook, but why don't you do a few more of those things, and we'll get through them.
We've only got three
super chats.
Four left to go. Charles Hartman says that a lot of gun control legislation are Jim Crow holdovers that were designed to deny newly freed blacks their Second Amendment rights. The Mind of God. Hello, Mind of God. Whole prison system in America is a disaster. Absolutely. Christy Santiago, I'll ask that question last. We'll close out with that one. VRCNG, I wish I could know how to pronounce that. Vercintrix. I hope I'm saying that right. Great show, guys. This is definitely a serious problem our society needs to address. Thank you, Nicholas, for coming on. I echo that.
Thank you.
Sentiment. And then Bram SLI1 says, Nicholas is awesome. I love his take on the for-profit prison system and atheism. And then to follow up on that, Christy Santiago says, how do I follow this phenomenal human?
Oh, well, thank you. You can look up Nicholas Soutter. I've got a website, but probably the easiest place to find me is Twitter. Both by Nick Soutter and Nicholas Lamar Soutter. Those are the easiest ways to find me. And if you see my picture, you've found me. I have my picture on and my real name on Twitter. That's how I go. And that's my website and even my email. If you really want to email me, you can email me too. But Twitter is probably the easiest way to reach me. I exist technically on Facebook, but I think that's true of most people on Facebook. It's kind of just technical.
I honestly, I have people that don't believe that I exist. It's actually a phenomenon. It's a huge phenomenon. I actually wrote a blog on it. There's actually
I'm linking your
terminology
in the
oh, thank you.
Down below too. So that would
I'll put up the right after this. I'll pin the Trump rant. It's 2 years old.
Yes.
It still applies. But I think a lot of people like it, so I will pin that. That'll be pinned within 5 minutes of this thing. And there's also a gun control rant, because gun control. The two names I on the same day I got two domain names, the Atheist Codex and the Gun Control Codex, because I was going to do one of those topics. I decided to do atheism. Every time there's a school shooting, I wish I'd done gun control. I'd come up with a different argument for atheism. My degree is actually in philosophy. I'd come up with a different argument for atheism. It's not like a huge revolutionary thing, but and a bit of a different approach, and that was the build of the codex. But I'd also done the same thing with gun control, and I just did atheism first.
that is down there in the description now. We'll put that that down there. Vibrantly Brantley just put in another super chat that says 7 super chats. Way to be astute and count the super chats vibrantly. That's good on you. But yeah, we would love to absolutely have you back and talk about that Atheist Codex. I think that would be fantastic. This was a great great discussion. I appreciate you taking the time to come on. Steve, is there anything that you want to
yeah, there's 2 quick things. One, make sure if you can stick around after for a few seconds, because I want to talk about your philosophy stuff for a minute.
Absolutely, sure.
I also wanted to add, this was in the news just today, and I'm going to not harp on it too much, but there was this published today that the Catholic Church in Illinois has withheld the names of at least 500 priests accused of abuse, and this is from the Illinois Attorney General. She has said specifically that the report said that 690 priests were accused of abuse. Only 185 names were made public by the diocese, and having found credible accusations of abuse, she has actually said that the Catholic Church is basically inept to be able to police themselves. Something that I've been saying for quite some time, and this is one of the reasons. She said it's a shocker. The preliminary report by the Attorney General concludes that the Catholic dioceses in Illinois are incapable of investigating themselves and, quote, will not resolve the clergy sexual abuse crisis on their own. This is what I've been saying for how long now? So this is a little bit of vindication on that. Again, this is another state that's had this issue. This is systemic. I'm sorry, it is a criminal organization at this point. I don't know how anybody else can say otherwise.
It is a criminal organization, and in fact, I've forgotten the name, but I've forgotten the Latin name, but about 20 years ago, the Vatican. No. But there was a document that they came out with that basically said, upon pain of excommunication, all of the, and we have the document on the Codex actually in Latin and in English. It was an official papal document, went to every single bishop. Actually, they had to come to Rome to get it. And it said that upon pain of excommunication, all investigations into any allegations of sexual abuse were to be handled with the utmost secrecy and security, and it suggested or implied that also meant to not cooperate with police investigations, which is how it was taken, and that was actually reaffirmed by Ratzinger while he was still no, wait a minute, if I recall, he may have written the original one for the Pope. Pope signed off on it, and then he reaffirmed it when he became Pope. It's but it's their official. Yeah, you can expect that the rate is about 15% of priests have engaged in some kind of. I'm sorry here. Okay, there it is. I just pinned the thing to my page, my Twitter page. You can expect the rate is about 15% in terms of how many priests in any given district you can expect are engaged in some kind of sexual abuse. The numbers are horrific. The one that is in the book Sin Eater abused 200 kids, and that is certainly not the most I've heard of. But people don't understand what's involved either. It is staggering. It is a criminal organization, and I think you hit the nail on the head.
Thank you.
Disgusting. But don't. I'm going to ask this question for everyone's mental health. Please just accept the fact that this is a criminal organization, and don't fight Steve like last time for 2 months solid, where my notifications on my Twitter just won't stop going off all day long because you can't handle the truth. Just accept the fucking truth. This is a disgusting organization that needs to be flushed down the toilet and be done with, so that we don't have to go through all these notifications. Steve, please, for the love of God.
I agree.
Or the love of
God. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I don't see how this is even argumentable. The people that have been apologetics, every one of them has been just vile. I have no interest in even continuing having a conversation with those people because there's nothing they can tell me that can probably much convince me otherwise. And I'm not saying that I won't change my position with enough evidence, but this is something that's just, it's beyond just, it's local isolated instances. No, these are, I mean, it's been every single state that's been brought up. It is systemic. Absolutely systemic.
How many more times has it happened? How many more times do we have to go through this bullshit? We do it all the time, like all the time. Something has to change. And Steve and I will probably wind up doing a stream on this where once more information comes out, we'll talk about it because it is an important issue. But at some point, how many more times do we have to go through this same song and dance where we get these names of these priests that have been covering up for other priests that have been doing this to kids? It's a tiring song and dance, and it's doing nothing but harming people. And it's time to actually make an effort to stop that from happening, where we don't get to this step anymore. It's ridiculous. It's crazy.
And it's nothing, by the way. There are people who, I mean, you're sitting there saying, oh, it's a big deal. It's nothing. It's worse in Ireland. It's worse in a number of South American countries. I can't think of which ones right now, but there's a number. We have it easy. We have it easy. So when you're sitting here talking about this problem, you need to realize if you're going to sit here and say it isn't a criminal organization, why don't you look at the stats where things are even worse? But I do want to real quickly, okay, it was the Criminale Solicitalis. Investigation should be handled in the most secretive way, restrained by perpetual silence under penalty of excommunication. This was Pope John Paul XXII in a letter to all Catholic bishops instructing them not to cooperate with police or local authorities on any child rape allegations, and it was reaffirmed by Joseph Ratzinger in 2003.
Disgusting.
That's the definition of a criminal conspiracy.
And let me tell you this.
Like the Codex has it.
It is worldwide, like you said. Yes. And when I'm making these comments about the church, I mean the entire church. I mean taking it down from dragging it, kicking and screaming from the Vatican, and closing that down, turning it into a fucking museum or an amusement park. That's what I mean. But in addition to what they're doing, and I don't want this to be forgotten in the hecticness that surrounds the child abuse, they're literally killing millions in Africa with their stance on condoms and contraceptives. That cannot be forgotten. That cannot be forgotten. That is happening daily. People are dying daily because they won't say that it's okay to use a condom. So at what point does this organization have to? Yeah,
that in itself is a issue. Yeah, that in itself is a reason to be against them. That one issue. Yeah. Now, can you imagine combining that with the practice of having more kids than you can support, having this, every one of these dioceses cover things up. It is beyond comprehension. This has been allowed to continue. Beyond comprehension. And again, this narrative that has to do with anti-theism. I'm not an anti-theist. I understand there are reasons for religion, and I'm not against religion in society. He is, right? So if the anti-theist, go after Kyle, right? He's your boogeyman there, not me. But
come at me, bro.
But the reality has to be made that this is an organization, and if this was any other secular organization, if this was a conventional organization, if this was a business, they would be gone. And it is a business. I mean, it really is a business. I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, they're a bank, for God's sake. So, I mean, I don't understand this narrative that it has to do with religion. No, it has to do with the criminal activities in a corrupt system.
Steve and I have said it before, and this is our final word. Once again, thank you for joining us. You are an amazing guest tonight. And Steve and I have said it. It's pissed off a lot of you before, but we'll say it again. If you continue to donate your money to this organization, knowing that part of that is going to pay for legal fees or to cover this up, it was all in that grand jury report where that money goes. It goes to continue to pay priests, continue to go over to Africa to tell them that condoms are bad. If you continue to pay those tithes, you are complicit in the activities that they are doing. So think about that. If you want to do good in the world, go donate that money to organizations that don't have all of this bad shit attached to it. There are organizations that do good and just good without the allegations of child rape and the actual child rape. So think about that. And hopefully you'll join us back tomorrow. Big night tomorrow night. Aaron Ra will be joining us again. He will be he will actually be having a conversation with his opponent, Reformed Christian apologist. If you watched last time, his opponent showed up too drunk, and so we had to stop at about 20 minutes in. Yeah, I'm telling you, we've had some.
Aaron won without saying a word. It was pretty impressive.
I heard that he won without saying a word. I didn't hear how. I was curious how. Now I know.
Oh, that's right. He sat back and let his opponent drunk ramble for 20 minutes until I got so comfortable. I was like, we got to stop. We got to stop this.
Wow.
All right, guys. We'll see you tomorrow for that. And have a good night. And yeah, I shouldn't have said and. I always do that. I keep going when I should just stop. I should just commit to the stop. I'm sorry, guys. I fucked up this ending again.
Commit to the stop.
Just take us out, Dave.
Non sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.